I want you to imagine something for a second. Picture yourself stuck in the absolute dead of a freezing Montreal winter.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a specific kind of cold.
Right. We're talking about that deep, bone-chilling cold where the wind just physically hurts your face and your toes have basically been frozen solid since, like, November.
You're just completely numb at that point.
Exactly. You are desperately, unapologetically craving blue water, actual sunshine, and warmth. So what do?
You book a ticket.
You book a ticket and you decide to completely embrace being a sunscreen-slathered tourist holding a day pass on a Caribbean cruise.
Which is such a relatable urge, honestly.
It really is. And that brings us to today's source material. Today we're diving into a wonderfully candid travel blog post. It's titled Caribbean Cruise Confessions. Yes, I'm a tourist. Pass the rum.
Great title.
It really sets the tone. It comes from the blog Wanderlust Over 70 by Roberta Hill, who is a highly experienced world traveler. So, okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the unvarnished reality of the modern cruise experience.
The key word there is unvarnished.
Exactly. We'll look at the hidden costs, the fascinating clash between those perfect postcard expectations and the gritty commercial realities of port towns. And we're going to look at a travel philosophy that involves treating a cruise like a buffet of geography.
That buffet concept is going to be really central to how we unpack this today. Because what stands out immediately in her writing is that the author refuses to feel any guilt about being a tourist.
None at all.
Right, because she recognizes the fundamental economic reality that you step into when you board one of these massive ships. These islands live on tourism.
Yeah, that's their lifeblood.
Exactly. When a cruise ship glides into port, it's essentially a floating city arriving. The moment it docks, the shops open, the taxis line up, the beach chairs snap to attention.
It's a whole machine waking up.
It is. If you're cruising in the Caribbean, you're not some, undercover explorer blending in with the locals. You are the economy. And this deep dive is really a masterclass in how you adjust your expectations, navigate heavy commercialization, and still manage to find authentic joy.
The honesty in this piece is just so refreshing. It starts right away with her description of the ship itself. They sailed on Princess Cruises' Grand Princess.
Which happens to be the eldest ship in their fleet, right?
Yes, the oldest one. She notes it was refurbished in 2019, which she hilariously points out translates in cruise years to meaning the carpeting is respectable, but slightly tired.
I love that phrase. Cruise years are definitely different from regular years.
They really are. But she does mention the ship is still perfectly capable of serving creme brulee out in the middle of the ocean.
Even if she couldn't actually find it on the menu.
Right. She hunted for it, but no luck. And afternoon tea was only available on their one single day at sea.
Which brings up an interesting dynamic, I think, about why seasoned travelers often choose to stick with one specific cruise line.
Yeah, because she is an experienced cruiser.
Exactly. Think about your own travel habits. There's a deep psychological comfort in brand familiarity. When you sail with the same brand over and over, the general layout gives you the sense of déjà vu.
You're not totally lost.
Exactly. You aren't wandering aimlessly down endless corridors on night 3 just trying to find the main dining room. You already know exactly where the good coffee hides.
Which is crucial.
It is. But she contrasts that baseline comfort with some undeniable service drop-offs on this particular trip.
Yeah, I'd call them more than just drop-offs. The execution had some real holes. They pre-ordered a soda package that was supposed to be waiting in the room.
Right.
But no one had bothered to ask what kind of soda they actually wanted. And it took a full 24 hours to get the correct cans delivered to their cabin.
That's a long time to wait for a Diet Coke when you've already paid for it.
It really is. And then they ordered room service breakfast twice. The first time, half the order was just entirely missing. And both times, they forgot the sugar for the coffee. And then, and this is the one that would drive me crazy there, was the pool towel incident.
Oh, the cool towels.
Imagine you're on a cruise ship, it's the early afternoon, prime swimming time under the Caribbean sun, and every single pool runs out of towels for 2 solid hours.
See, that touches on what hospitality experts call the friction versus value paradox.
The friction versus value paradox.
Yeah. When you pay for a premium vacation specifically to escape the winter stress, your tolerance for minor logistical failures just drops significantly.
That makes sense.
Right. A missing sugar packet at your local diner back home is nothing. You just ask the waitress for another one. But a missing sugar packet when you've paid thousands of dollars to be pampered on a floating hotel, It feels like a crack in the facade.
It breaks the illusion.
Exactly. Those little friction points degrade the premium illusion. And speaking of friction, she runs into a major psychological hurdle once she actually steps off the ship into the ports. It's what she calls the taxi equation.
The taxi equation. The mental math of this sounds absolutely brutal, especially for her as a Canadian. She describes taking a taxi in St. Thomas. It was $14 per person each way.
Which adds up incredibly fast.
Fast. So for 2 people, round trip, you're multiplying that single fare by 4 legs. And then she has to multiply all of that by what she brilliantly calls the weeping Canadian dollar.
The weeping Canadian dollar.
Because it's operating at about 30% less power against the US dollar.
What's fascinating here is how that specific type of mental math actively degrades traveler satisfaction. The author explicitly warns against constantly calculating exchange rates. She notes that it literally steals joy in small increments.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Precisely. It's a heavy cognitive load. Every time you buy a bottle of water or hop in a taxi, your brain is doing currency conversions in the background. It pulls you out of the vacation mindset and drops you right back into a scarcity mindset.
And she actually contrasts this with her usual travel style, which I found interesting.
How so?
Well, she mentions that when she does slow travel in Europe, she rarely converts currency in her head. She just lets it be. Because slow travel, where you immerse yourself in one culture for weeks and live a bit more like a local look, it allows you to sort of ignore those daily fluctuations.
They're not paying an entry fee every time you turn around.
Right. But cruising is essentially hyper-capitalist speed dating with geography. In the Caribbean ports, the US dollar is absolute king, and her brain just forces her to do the math constantly.
Well, because the environment is built entirely on microtransactions. The ports themselves are heavily commercialized hubs designed to process thousands of people efficiently.
They aren't exactly pristine, untouched villages.
No, not at all. The pristine, idyllic beaches you see in the brochures, they're usually located far away from the deepwater docks where these massive ships have to tie up.
Right.
And that geographical separation means you're entirely reliant on the local taxi syndicates.
Right.
If you want the postcard beach experience, you simply have to accept the commercial infrastructure and pay the fare. You can't avoid the math.
But, St. Thomas wasn't a total wash on the wallet. No. Once they actually got past the taxi fare and got to the beach, she found the pricing completely reasonable. 2 loungers and an umbrella were only $10 total.
Oh, that's actually great.
Yeah. And the snorkeling right offshore was surprisingly fantastic. Clear water and fish that were totally unbothered by the tourists. But here's the best part.
Okay, lay it on me.
If you rent snorkel gear there, the vendor hands you a dog biscuit.
A dog biscuit.
So the fish.
Yes, suddenly you are the absolute most popular person on the reef. She paints this amazing picture of her travel companion, Louise. Louise just rented a floating noodle for $5, and she's floating happily in the shallows while all these fish are swarming her for the dog biscuit.
That is a perfect example of finding a localized, quirky experience within a highly structured tourist environment. It's just a small, simple moment of genuine delight.
It really is. But as we look at their itinerary, that balance between structured commercialism and genuine delight gets a lot harder to maintain. If we move on to their stop in St. Martin, specifically Philipsburg on the Dutch side, the physical reality of the environment just hits them like a wall.
A literal wall of heat. Technically, you could walk from the cruise port to the beach in Philipsburg. The physical distance really isn't insurmountable.
But you're definitely not going to walk it.
No. She's incredibly clear about this. The heat and humidity are so oppressive, she describes it as wrapping around your neck like a damp scarf.
That description is so visceral.
Isn't it? If you've ever stepped out of an air-conditioned airport into the deep tropics, you know exactly what she means by the damp scarf. So to avoid just melting on the pavement, you are forced into taking a water taxi.
Which is another microtransaction.
Exactly. It's a 2-minute ride. It costs $7 round trip, and there is no one-way option available. You are entirely locked into their system.
It's a monopoly of convenience. You pay to avoid the damp scarf. And navigating that intense heat requires real pragmatism. I think this is where her experience as a seasoned traveler really shows through.
How she handles the heat.
Yes. To survive the midday sun and the high prices on the Philipsburg boardwalk, they found a spot offering 2 chairs, shade, and 2 rum drinks included. But because, as she wonderfully puts it, moderation and hydration occasionally coexist in my world, they decided to upgrade to 2 beers for an extra $15 instead of the rum.
I thought her workaround for the heat here was absolutely genius. Earlier in the day, they had bought a large bottle of lemon-flavored Volvic water. She specifically notes that it actually tasted like real lemon, not just a rumor of
Like
citrus.
an actual flavor.
Yeah. So after taking a few sips of the beer, they just poured the cold lemon water right into the bottle. She says the French can call it a panache, but she calls it survival.
The Caribbean shandy was born.
Exactly. It's such a clever, practical way to handle the intense heat without completely losing your bearings in the middle of the day.
And her moderation there is a sharp contrast to what she observes happening around her. If we connect this to the bigger picture, she talks about the real dangers of cruise exuberance.
Oh man, cruise exuberance.
She watched guests who had clearly underestimated the combination of blazing Caribbean sun and unlimited alcohol packages.
That's dangerous combo.
Very dangerous. She describes these guests as burnt to a crisp, generously overserved, and staggering back toward the pier like sailors from a 19th century novel.
That is quite the visual.
It really is. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when tourists let the all-inclusive vacation mindset completely override their basic physical limits. The environment will humble you if you aren't careful.
It definitely will. And unfortunately, not every port had a clever survival hack to save the day. That brings us to a larger theme in her writing, the clash between the marketing illusion you're sold and the actual reality of these destinations.
We see this heavily in both Antigua and Barbados.
Yeah, we do. She flat out calls Antigua the letdown. On paper, the marketing sounded amazing. You're supposed to step off the boat right onto a vibrant street filled with upscale jewelry shops.
But the reality on the ground was different.
Very different. Those shiny, curated shops abruptly end just a few blocks in, revealing a much poorer area where you are just constantly being approached by individuals offering tours.
The contrast is stark.
It is. Plus, because the island is volcanic, there isn't really a beach right near the port to escape to. You're just kind of stuck in the concrete. The whole experience just felt incredibly flat for her.
That abrupt transition from upscale jewelry stores to economic hardship is jarring for a lot of tourists.
Yeah.
But we have to ask ourselves, are we sure the commercialized port is just a trap? Or is it exactly the infrastructure we as tourists have demanded?
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Right, because tourists say they want authentic local experiences, but they also want pristine safety, a cold Diet Coke, and a clean bathroom waiting for them at all times.
We want the comforts of home in a foreign place.
Exactly. That level of expected comfort requires deep commercialization, which essentially creates this artificial sanitized bubble right at the dock. And when you step out of that bubble, the reality of the local economy hits you.
That tension is perfectly captured when they visit a church they had spotted from the ship in Antigua. They walked up a small hill to get to it, and when they arrived, the author notes she had never seen a functioning cathedral so debilitated.
It was really in rough shape.
The lawns were unkept, the bricks were crumbling, and tombstones were literally falling over in the yard. To make matters more complicated, there was a $5 entry fee at the door, and a funeral was actively taking place inside.
Which is a lot to process on a vacation.
Definitely. So the author completely refuses to go in. She decides to just stay outside in the heat and wait for 45 minutes. But her companion, Louise...
Louise is a different kind of traveler.
She really is. Louise is the kind of traveler who never turns down a chance to see a church or a botanical garden, no matter what. She pays the $5 fee, respectfully goes inside, and discovers that the interior of this crumbling church is made entirely of pristine, beautiful wood carving.
What is a profound metaphor, actually.
Isn't it?
Yeah. The author judges the entire experience by its crumbling, debilitated exterior and opts out. She stays outside. Louise looks past the rough facade, ventures in despite the awkwardness, and finds incredible beauty. It shows that sometimes the value of a destination depends entirely on the traveler's willingness to look past the surface-level disappointment.
But when they moved on to Barbados, looking past the disappointment was a lot harder, mainly because it stemmed directly from misleading marketing.
The snorkeling illusion.
Exactly. All of her pre-trip research and all the island's advertising touted this amazing snorkel from shore experience. You're supposedly able to just walk into the water and see turtles right off the beach.
Which sounds idyllic.
It does. And the taxi rides to get there were super reasonable, just $2 to town and $5 to the beach. But once they got there, the reality set in real fast.
Let me guess, the turtles weren't exactly wading in the shallows.
Not even close.
Right.
Yes, you can technically snorkel from shore to see the reefs and the shipwrecks if you are an Olympic-level swimmer.
Right.
The areas are way too far out for the average person to just casually swim to.
Which is a classic commercial funneling tactic.
Yeah.
By promoting a free experience that's practically out of reach for most normal swimmers, the local operators essentially force the tourists into paying for an excursion.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about it like that.
Yeah, it's very intentional. In this case, the author watched most of the people on the beach just give up and opt for a $40 per person glass-bottom boat ride just to see what they were originally promised they could see from the shore for free.
That is so frustrating.
Did you take the boat?
No. She deemed it a complete ripoff and skipped it. She decided to just protect the good snorkeling memories she had already made earlier in the trip. And to add to that letdown, Barbados just felt incredibly commercialized to her in general.
More so than the other islands.
Yeah. Bridgetown is a massive, real city with major department stores and upscale boutiques. She actually felt it was more overly commercialized for tourists than Cozumel, which, if you know cruising, is really saying something.
The Cozumel is basically one giant port shopping mall.
Exactly. So Barbados was definitely a miss for her. But just when you think the entire cruise is turning into a series of commercialized letdowns, they arrive at Dominica.
Ah, Dominica.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It almost didn't happen. The seas were so rough that morning that for a while it looked like it wouldn't even be safe to dock the ship.
But the captain persisted.
He did.
And thank goodness he did, because Dominica really emerged as the absolute star of the itinerary. And once again, we see the author and Louise taking completely different paths that beautifully highlight the island's dual nature.
Yeah, they split up for this one.
Right. Louise opted for a bus tour, mostly because she finds small snorkeling boats unpleasant. And her photos from the bus revealed an island that was lush, dramatic, and just unapologetically green, with these massive mountains rising straight out of the sea.
It sounds gorgeous.
It does. But her experience was still heavily impacted by the realities of cruise tourism. She noted that while the water looked incredibly inviting from the bus, you couldn't really get near it because of the massive crowds and long lines of people just waiting for a quick dip.
But the author's experience was totally different. She booked an independent snorkeling boat trip for the afternoon, and she says it was the absolute best snorkeling of the entire week.
Better than St. Thomas.
Way better. Clear, vibrant, and genuinely unique. Her first stop was near Champagne Bay, which gets its name from these captivating, continuous bubbles that actually rise up from the black volcanic seafloor.
That sounds incredible.
Can you imagine swimming through naturally carbonated water over a black sand bottom? She looked at the scenery around her, floating in these bubbles, and thought, this is why I came.
That moment of realization that this is why I came, feeling that, is exactly what every traveler is chasing. But the geography of Dominica is intense, and it forces you to adapt. Because of those rough waters we mentioned earlier, the boat couldn't safely anchor at their second planned stop.
The Soufriere Scott's Head Marine Reserve.
Right. So instead, the captain diverted to an alternate site located directly under a massive sheer cliff on the west coast, a cliff known locally as the Witch, or La Sorcière.
The folklore surrounding this cliff is incredibly heavy. Legend says that the island's historical inhabitants would rush unfaithful brides right off the top of that cliff.
It's a dark history.
Very. Another tale talks about warriors intentionally jumping from that exact same edge just to escape capture by their enemies. It adds such a dramatic, heavy, historical layer to the natural beauty they were casually swimming in.
It really does. And it also highlights how we interact with the natural world as tourists. The geography right at the base of that cliff is staggering. The boat anchored in water that was only about 5 meters deep.
Pretty shallow.
But immediately next to them, right where they were swimming, a vertical wall plunged into a dark abyss over 250 meters deep.
That gives me vertigo just thinking about it.
Right. This raises an important question about how the most authentic and vibrant travel experiences often require navigating those rough waters and stepping away from the curated safety of the port. You're confronting this wild, untamed nature, which contrasts so sharply with the manicured experiences we discussed earlier. And from there, the boat docked at the nearby town of Soufriere.
Yeah, Soufriere is this tiny fishing community of under 1,000 people, but it supplies roughly 40% of the entire island's seafood.
It's a working town.
Exactly. They get caught in a quick 10-minute downpour right as they land, which is just classic, unpredictable tropical weather. Once it clears, they walk over to a spot called Bubble Beach. Now, this is a spot highly popular with local residents for hanging out after a long day of work.
But for the author.
For the author, it didn't quite live up to the postcard hype. The local church next door was under heavy repair, and the hangout spot itself was just a barricaded area on the beach with about a foot of hot water sitting over hot, stony sand. Not exactly the glamorous paradise you see in a brochure.
But that is the crux of a genuine travel experience. True authenticity isn't always physically comfortable, and it is certainly not always photogenic for Instagram.
That's a great point.
The most vibrant experiences, like snorkeling near a 250-meter drop-off or visiting a working fishing village that actually sustains the island, require stepping out of the polished tourist zones. Sometimes a local hangout is just a hot, stony beach, and that is perfectly okay.
Because it's not for us.
Exactly. It doesn't exist for the tourist's aesthetic pleasure. It exists for the community. When you venture out of the commercial bubble, you have to accept that you're visiting someone else's daily reality, not a movie set designed for your relaxation.
So bringing this all together, what does this all mean for you, the listener? After the heavy heat of Phillipsburg, the falling tombstones in Antigua, the exhausting mental currency conversions, the missing sugar packets, and the rough seas of Dominica, was she actually glad she went on this cruise?
Her answer is a resounding yes.
Absolutely yes, because at the end of the day, she achieved her primary goal. She escaped the Montreal winter, she didn't have to feel her face hurting from the cold, and she got to swim in warm blue water. She found one island that truly moved her, and she was reminded that not every single stop has to be extraordinary to make a trip worthwhile.
That realization brings us right back to the most profound takeaway from her writing, which is her buffet philosophy of travel.
The buffet of geography.
Yes, cruising, by its very design, isn't slow travel. You aren't immersing yourself deeply into one culture for weeks on end. Cruising is sampling. As she puts it, you treat it like a buffet. When you go to a buffet, you try a little bit of everything.
Correct.
Some dishes are phenomenal, and you go back for seconds, like the champagne-based snorkeling in Dominica. Other dishes are a bit flat or disappointing, like the commercial funneling in Barbados.
So you just politely leave them on your plate and move on.
Exactly. You don't let one bad dish ruin the whole meal. By adjusting your expectations to match this buffet reality, you actively protect your joy as a traveler.
Think about how liberating that mindset is. Whether you're trying to ignore the weeping value of your currency, or figuring out if you need to be an Olympic swimmer just to see a sea turtle, or cleverly turning a bottle of lemon water into a survival shandy. Sometimes the simple act of escaping the winter and feeling the warm sun on your face is exactly enough.
It really is.
You don't have to apologize for being a tourist. You just have to know how to navigate the buffet.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder before you book your next getaway. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about the friction of the ports, the taxi equations, and the letdowns of commercialized islands.
Yeah.
When you plan your next vacation, are you subconsciously demanding that every single moment be extraordinary and authentic? Or can you give yourself the permission to just be a tourist, to sample the buffet, accept the letdowns, and find profound satisfaction in the simple, uncomplicated warmth of the sun?